Okay, we're back to talk about Pluribus on Apple TV, episode 4, titled Please, Carol. This episode written by Allison Tatlock and directed by Zetna Fuentes. The episode begins by introducing us to Menuso Sovedo, the Spanish speaker who works at a storage facility and refuses to help or engage with the others. We see him scanning radio frequencies, denying the food that they provide for him, and scrounging for scraps of food in the storage units until we see the other end of the call that Carol made to him in the last episode. Carol begins to consider all that she's learned about the others and hypothesizes that they cannot lie to her. She tests this theory by asking Larry what Helen really thought about Carol's books and her unpublished novel. Carol goes to the hospital to visit the recovering Zosia and asks her if the joining can be reversed. Zosia refuses to answer, so Carol comes up with a plan to inject her with truth serum to see if she will be honest about it. But when Zosia starts to lose control, Carol begins badgering her with questions about the joining. A group of others surround them and begin chanting, "Please, Carol." Zosia collapses from cardiac arrest, and members of the others try to revive her. So basically, I think this episode exists to maybe start setting in motion a plan that Carol is developing for what she wants to do, even if she's on her own to try and do this. However, with the introduction of Manusos, I get the impression that we'll be seeing a lot more of him somehow, some way, despite them being in different countries.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Really enjoyed that opening scene. I mean, it was like 12 minutes long. It was a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
chunk of the episode. And really reminiscent of some things in, say, Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad. Maybe Better Call Saul more. So I don't know about you, but it really
Yeah.
reminded me of the whole scene where Lalo is like in the sewer and then goes to take a shower and then takes a nap in his car and then goes back to the sewer. It
Yes,
reminded me of
yes.
that a little bit, you know?
Yes,
Um,
that's right.
Apologies, that all feels like a spoiler. I don't think it's a bad. I don't think that's really a spoiler. I'm not telling you
They
why he's in the
they
sewer.
they shower in Better Call Saul. That just
Yeah, yeah,
happens.
yeah. Guy takes a shower. Um, and yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the episode overall. There was something else I was going to say before we start talking about. Well, whatever. We'll get back around to it at some point. Whatever it was, I was thinking of. Did you enjoy this episode?
Yeah, I did. I always hesitate to use some of these words, but maybe the least active, or I don't want to say slowest episode, but in terms of the pace of where we're going, a very deliberate thing to set up in this episode, which is Carol discovers a very important thing about the others and begins sort of a very rudimentary way to try to figure out how to enact what her plan is going to be. She doesn't know that she necessarily knows what her plan is, but she has a key piece of information now that could and probably will set up what happens in the rest of the season.
Yeah, good. Right. This is the other thing that you were, hitting on that I was going to pick up on how, in a meaningful way, I think that what she starts doing in terms of her plan does resemble what I think we basically suggested her plan would be coming out of last week. But she's almost even more direct, right? I think I said something like maybe she'll ask for the data and all of that kind of stuff.
Right,
And no,
exactly.
she's going directly to like, tell me how to undo this.
That's right.
Um,
Your non-answer is an answer. Yeah.
which they aren't willing to do. But she does discover that they cannot lie,
Hmm.
which I guess I already had a sense of, but it hadn't been maybe as confirmed, so this makes sense. So she starts writing out what she knows about them, and at first she writes that they're weirdly honest,
Yeah.
right? And then does this test with the individual who used to be known as Larry. He had a lot of friends. Um, which I
Apparently,
and
apparently rides a bike. Yeah.
Apparently, yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to talk about that scene at a little bit of length here. First of all, because hey, man, it's Jeff Hiller.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would count me as a Jeff Hiller fan. I hope he's in the show more.
Yeah. This was a really fascinating scene, and I don't know if you had a chance to catch the podcast, the official podcast about this episode.
I have not
They
as yet.
Yeah, they spent a good amount of time talking about him coming into the show. Ray Seahorn is on this episode, and she talks about how they got together beforehand to prepare and just some of the things that they wanted to do and how they wanted to play off each other. I mean, just really, really fascinating. And they just just profusely talking about how great he was to work with and how much he deserved his Emmy and all this. So, I mean, just really great scene and how he was sort of the perfect character to embody this, what I think they call on the podcast, this finely modulated sense of smiling and happiness, like
Hmm.
how well he displays that. So really a perfect character for that scene.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And then it got me thinking about how one of the, I guess I want to say problems, but I don't mean it negatively, that this show faces is that there aren't a lot of characters,
Right.
you
Right.
know. There are potentially a lot of people, but are the others, we call them that, characters, and to the
Hmm.
extent that they are a kind of collective hive mind, and that's part of the premise that undermines their individuality. So the sense of individuality you get is something that really comes from the performance of the actors, I think.
Yes. Yes.
So that's a challenge, I guess I mean, for the show in terms of can they create sort of compelling characters when this is the setup? And with
Yeah.
Larry here, I feel like they really did, and Jeff Heller was really perfect for what's going on in the scene, because this is where Carol ultimately starts asking what Helen thought of her books and all of that.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I actually thought about in our conversation from a few minutes ago, a little bit of sense of what Poker Face does and what this show is doing. Just to reference who it was in the last episode, the actor's name was Robert Bailey Jr., who played the DHL guy. I mean, just a kind of a real fun heat check couple minutes that he had on the episode. Jeff Hiller comes in this episode. Don't know if we'll see more like that, names popping up or people doing these cameos or short visits with Carol or ways that they'll engage with this show. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be that these are characters that will be around in the long term.
Okay.
But yeah, so just pull in people that can play these types of performances opposite Ray Seahorn. I mean, that certainly is a model I think that can work for the rest of the season. I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, and I got to thinking about too. I don't know if they'd want to do this, but it is a narrative possibility where they could have people playing themselves,
Hmm. Hmm.
zombified versions of themselves.
Yeah.
Perhaps I guess it would be. I watched Vince Gilligan was on the Rich Eisen show this week, maybe yesterday.
Okay.
So there's an interview out there that I guess I'll recommend if people want to watch it. Be careful. I personally appreciate this. You don't encounter this kind of interview very much, but in this interview, spoilers are on the table for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. They're just like they weren't holding back
Oh,
on
okay.
on
Okay.
they just start getting into some pretty big spoilers with regard to those shows. So don't watch that interview probably if you haven't seen those. But I think they're just taking the point of view of, yeah, come on, people have seen it by
Yeah,
now.
come
Like,
on.
what are you doing?
Right.
Um, and maybe less so with Pluribus, but they're talking about all of that. The question Rich Eisen asked him there, because Pluribus is set in Albuquerque, that's one thing they
Hmm.
were talking about, about any possibility of like crossover character appearances.
Yep.
And Vince Gilligan didn't rule it out, but I kind of hope they don't do that.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
could, but I kind of hope they don't. You know what I
I,
mean?
I want to say that somebody found one already. It was like when somebody was going through a series of files. There was a name on one of the files. There was a name of a character in one of those shows, right? Just sort of say that yes, you're in the same universe.
Yeah.
Nothing monumental, but just something to sort of connect it a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. 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 It's almost like the more minor the character, the more you could do it, and it might feel
Yeah,
okay because
yeah,
it starts feeling more like an Easter egg than you know, um, I don't want like Huel to show up or something.
yeah.
Come on, man. um, but the other thing about that interview that I thought was noteworthy to tie it in, which again, people can go watch it if you want to. It's on YouTube. It's like half an hour long. Um, One thing we've talked about on here though is like how much story do we have here?
Right.
And we know that it's already got a second season. And I think at one point I even speculated about the possibility that maybe it's only going to be a two-season show, but from what Vince Gilligan said in that interview, doesn't sound like it. I mean, he said
Yeah.
something like, "We've got more ideas at this point about this show than we did at this point in making Better Call Saul."
Oh boy. Okay.
Oh,
Wow.
okay. You got a lot of ideas. All right. I'm curious what they
That was six
are.
seasons.
Yeah, I mean, so it makes me wonder though, right? Like, is this going to kind of break open at some point? Because it still feels to me like, all right, you got the premise, and the plot is Carol trying to figure out how to undo it.
Right. Right.
I don't know how many seasons you can go if that's all that's going on. So,
I think you're right, but I also think there will be a lot of supplementing with these types of Jeff Hiller-esque performances or conversations. And there was a lot of just real fun conversation about this as well in their podcast. But just the scene where Carol watches herself after taking the truth serum, just sort of a they gave her 4 pages of prompts and just like, okay, Ray Seahorn, just go cook for a little while and we're going to film you and just, just turn into a really fascinating part of the episode.
yeah, and I'm there for that stuff. And I guess the big thing that's going to change things in some way is going to have something to do with Manusos.
Yes, I think so.
Am I saying that right? I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yes, Manuso Savedo.
Yeah. Apologies if I mangle
Yeah,
the Spanish name.
yeah. It must be said, along with Carol and Zoja, is one of 3 listed main cast members. So there's certainly more coming.
Yeah, I went on IMDb to make sure I had his name, his character's name, at least, because we were
Yeah.
talking about it on the podcast, and saw that. I think he's credited as being in 7 episodes or something like that. So that would be all of them that remain, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Which would be no surprise from what they give us here. Let's talk about him a little bit further. What we see of him, you mentioned he is scanning radio frequencies. Starting with that, I do love this is one of the ways in which it remind me of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad too. The way that they don't make they don't necessarily make explicit what is happening. Like you have to
Yeah.
figure it out. What is he doing? You know what I mean? And of course, there's no one there for him to say what he's doing to or anything like
Right.
that. But they're just showing it at length. Um, my interpretation ultimately is he's like scanning shortwave radio, looking for someone else. Right? Is that
Yeah.
how you read
Yeah.
it?
That somebody somewhere has to be trying to locate other people. And so the way to do that, if they've taken out the Wi-Fi, they've taken out the internet, they've taken out every other form of communication, they're doing it on short form radio. They can't even pick up the phone and talk to other people. So radio is the way to do it. And yeah, just a great example. I mean, plenty of other people have said this, but just the way that Vince Gilligan could sort of, put the drama in the ordinary. You're just sort of
Yeah.
this, you're speculating this whole time what he's doing. And I think that we're on the right assumption here, but yeah, just sort of fascinating to have this dive into what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And then have it, I don't know if it was surprising, but to culminate in this other side of the phone call that he gets.
Right. So apparently he has refused to communicate with the others to an extreme extent, as
Right.
opposed to even Carol, right? They're trying to deliver him food. He's got the gate to his storage facility locked up, so they can't get in. They'll leave food outside the gate, and he just goes and pushes it over with a crowbar. Screw you.
Yeah.
I'm not eating your food. Even though that's driving him to the lengths of like licking the top of an old
Dog food
salmon
can?
can. What
Yeah.
what did you say?
Yeah.
What did you
Yeah, it
guess?
looked like some sort of canned fish or meat, and then but then ultimately having to eat some looked like wet dog food for his meal that night.
Yeah, which I guess he found in the storage units. That was how I was putting that together. So he's running out of food for sure.
Yeah,
And it does make some sense that food is not really something people will tend to put in their storage unit.
that's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, it's possible, but it makes sense that all he found was a few cans of dog food. And that's not going to last him very long either, you know. So is that going to be the thing that ultimately pushes him? Or, well, we've also got the fact that he got the phone call from Carol,
Hmm.
which I read as, you know, at first he's presuming it's the others calling him, just like, leave me
Because they have
alone.
called him a lot before. Yeah.
But when she cusses him out,
Yes.
he knows, he's
Yes.
like, oh, well, but that's not one of them.
Yeah. Can't be. So I need to I need to revisit who this is that's calling me.
It made me wonder if Carol um had that in mind.
Mm.
Or like, so did she cuss him out simply because she got mad at him?
Yeah.
Or, you know, did she in some way get that he was refusing to talk to her because he thought she was one of the others? And of course, one of the others wouldn't do that. So it does signal to him. I don't know. I don't know if she's like,
Yeah.
was being
Yeah,
that savvy.
that's interesting because it's not like she needs to, speak in code around them or anything, and they know what she's trying to do and who she's trying to contact. She could just call and say, "Hey, this is Carol. I'm, not one of these other assholes. You can talk to me." And probably he would get it that way, but it isn't either way. It's an effective tool to be able to say, "Okay, I'm not one of these others."
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, though, right? That's what she tried, right? But he wouldn't even let her get through a sentence. You
That's
know what I
right.
mean?
That's right. Yeah,
She called and she said, "Hi, my name's Carol Circa from the United States." Hangs up on her. You
that's right. Yeah.
know. But so it does seem like she's managed to get through now. Of course, how would they communicate with one another in the future? Um, could be easy, could be hard. I'm curious to see where they go with that. I guess a lot of it's going to hang on whether or to what extent Manusos is ever willing to kind of use the others to
Yeah,
for
and
anything.
I wonder if we're introduced to that shortwave radio to, he eventually breaks. He's like, I got to get some food. And oh, by the way, call Carol. And he tells Carol to get a shortwave radio so that they can communicate. And I don't believe that the others can track that or hear into what they would be saying there, but I really have no way of knowing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you made me think about the telephone. Do they almost seem like they're in the phones, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess then that there would be some surveillance on any phone call, I guess.
Yeah.
You can only use a landline. I don't know. It's not entirely clear.
Right.
Because it almost feels like an old school kind of setup. You know
Yeah.
how
Yes.
it used to be before even our time, really. We're too young for this.
Yeah.
But my understanding is it used to be like you get the operator and tell them what you want, and then they connect you up, and like you see
Exactly.
like the woman with the cords going doopity doop or whatever.
Yeah. They could always listen in whenever they wanted to. Yeah.
It feels more like that than even what phones were like in the 1990s or something.
Right.
But that's
Right.
weird because I'm pretty sure this story is set in modern day. That's one thing I was thinking about. I was like, you have a landline?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Lots of landlines in Albuquerque in 2025. Yeah.
they're like, do you have a landline, Ryan?
Nope.
I
Nope.
don't mean
I
it.
just do not.
The only people I know is like I feel like my aunt and uncle have a landline. People like that who just like decided to keep it.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
that's exactly what my situation is.
same
Yeah.
phone number they've had for 50 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but I haven't had a landline in 20 years or something personally. I was early on a lot of this stuff. You know what I mean? And it's weird to me now how I went from being kind of early to now being like a stodgy old Luddite or something in a way. It was like uh, I was the guy who only had a cell phone at a point where that was almost an issue. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
How do we reach you? Yeah.
um, well, if you want to sign up for this, we need a landline phone number. You can't just give
Right.
us a cell.
Right.
um, so anyway, yeah, maybe they'll start communicating via. shortwave radio. I guess that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, there is something of a language barrier, right? I mean, at least my read on it, and I could be wrong. I don't feel like Carol is a fluent Spanish speaker. I feel like she's someone who, like me, took high school Spanish.
Yeah, that is certainly what it sounded like. Picked up on all the slang and curse words that she needed to when she was in high school in New Mexico or wherever. I mean, we obviously don't have the other side from Manusos. Now, one the other thing I learned in this podcast, Carlos Manuel Vesca, who plays Manusos, is fluent in English and has an immaculate accent. So there is not going to be any issue if we learn, oh, Manusos knows more English than Carol knows Spanish.
Oh, this is also possible because look, he could be a fluent English speaker for all we know.
Yeah, yeah,
Because we have to bear in mind that it would seem he hasn't talked to the others at all.
correct.
He's just
None.
refused to communicate with them.
Right.
So they think he doesn't speak English or he wasn't included in the group of English speakers, but maybe they don't really know that. That's the only thing
That's right.
about that, I guess. Um, let's see. We should have gotten this in earlier when we were talking about Jeff Hiller and all of that. That apparently the mayor who shows up there is the actual mayor of Albuquerque, Tim Keller.
Yeah, you were talking about zombified versions of themselves. We actually have one in this episode where Carol has sees people working on her house, and she looks at one of them and says, "Aren't you the mayor?" And it turns out that yes, he actually is the mayor of Albuquerque that they recruited to play this role, and they actually said he was quite good. Vince Gilligan compared him, I think, to Aaron Eckhart in looks and in the way that he acts, so not a bad comparison.
Yeah, and it's cool that they're doing that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's also just very kind of, I think it's cool that they're doing the show in Albuquerque because it's not for a narrative reason. It is because um, they made Breaking Bad in Albuquerque and then, of
right.
course, made Better Call Saul in Albuquerque. And by all accounts, it's just that Vince Gilligan likes working there, and these people he's been working with
Yeah,
for 20 years now.
they love him.
Um,
They love him.
where apparently, to my understanding, even with Breaking Bad, why were they were filming in Albuquerque for reasons that had to do with budget and things like that, even
Hmm.
at first, and
Yeah,
that there was some discussion of pretending that Albuquerque was LA. And Vince Gilligan was like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to
yeah,
actually just make it Albuquerque. And so it kind of all stems back to that decision.
yeah,
And I guess they had a similar conversation about Pluribus. We're going to film in Albuquerque, but it's actually set in Albuquerque. Where
yep.
again, it was like, we just got to make it set in Albuquerque, which I really respect because you see sometimes weird stuff like I think it's with Suits where it's like they're filming it in Montreal or something, and they're pretending it's New York City.
All
It's
right,
like,
all
dude, I
right.
know what New York City looks like. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You can't do that. Anyhow, I mean, it just having the actual mayor in the show
right,
just kind of
right.
feels like more of a nice tribute or whatever to
Yeah.
Albuquerque,
And there's
something like that.
fascinating stuff out there about how they have actually bought this plot of land just outside of Albuquerque, and built this entire cul-de-sac just so they could, do things like blow up part of the house and,
Oh,
turn off the lights when they needed to and stuff like that. So I mean, just completely constructed a cul-de-sac out of nothing after negotiating with the city to buy this property. And they actually had people coming up asking them if the homes will be for sale. All you really have is like, facades of houses and the fronts of them. It's not actual homes that are there, but just interesting stuff out there about how well they have been able to work within that city. They've had that relationship for so long, as you pointed out.
yeah, which is cool. It was very cool. Let's see. We mentioned the truth serum or
Hmm.
sodium thiopental, the real thing.
Yep. Yep.
Um, sometimes regarded as a truth serum. It's questionable. Also sometimes used to kill people,
That's correct.
whether through euthanasia, lethal injection, and that kind of thing. Kind of interesting how Carol decides to try it on herself and film herself and you mentioned earlier, right, how they just kind of gave Ray Seahorn some things to play with. And it's definitely an entertaining scene. I guess I don't know how realistic it is. I mean, as with other things, I would guess that they brought in some consultants and things like that to try to make it as realistic as possible.
Yeah, I think so. I did find it interesting. That's whole idea of true serum and not being able to, um, I guess, contain yourself or hold it in, and what Zoja is struggling with. I had to pause and read. She opens up the dosage book and reads exactly what it is that she's, and that's more for our benefit. And it talks about it being an induction agent. An
Hmm.
induction agent is more used for the idea of sort of rapidly inducing anesthesia. And so I guess I haven't really associated that necessarily with truth serum. I think it's maybe just more meant to lower inhibitions, lower senses, be able to just give a sense of can sort of get get something out of somebody when their defenses are just completely down.
Right, but I found myself thinking this through in a way where I think Carol's plan actually makes a lot of sense, even if you are bearing in mind what we know in the real world with regard to the idea that this is a truth serum.
Yeah, yeah,
Because, to my understanding, the reason it has this reputation is that if you give someone sodium thiopental, they'll blab,
yeah.
right? The question is whether they're actually telling the truth,
Correct.
right? So, like
Yes.
similar to studies about torture and things like this, right? Like potentially you can torture someone to make them talk, but there
Right.
are a lot of indications that they'll start telling you what they think you want to hear. So it's not
Yeah.
necessarily true or reliable, right? However, if Carol has discovered, and we all now also know that the others, like Zosia, cannot lie, then anything she says would be more trustworthy, right? Um,
Yeah, they don't lose the inability to lie, lose the inability to, I guess, they lose an ability for lies by omission, where they can just leave things out or not answer a question. Just sort of defenses are down. They'll say anything at that point, or that's what she's getting her to try and do at least.
that's her hope, at least. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
her hope, and I think that does make some sense, right?
yeah,
Because they do have this out, right? They can't lie, but they can refuse to answer a question. So that's
yeah.
interesting. I keep finding myself thinking about with my philosophy background, like, all right, so are they Kantians now? You know, are they utilitarian Kantians? You know, it definitely is interesting the extent to which they're almost written like they are perfectly moral.
Yes, yes,
They will not kill. They don't want to hurt people. They can't hurt, like even hurting your feelings. Oh no, you know. Now we're discovering in a strong sense they cannot lie, um, and so on. And yet all of that feeds into what makes them sort of feel creepily inhuman. You know,
yeah.
so it's an interesting thing they're playing with there.
Did you wonder at all as the crowd sort of started to converge on Carol and on Zoja? They've talked in the first couple episodes about this biological imperative. I was wondering, there's this idea of, well, if Carol, and maybe this doesn't make sense because she just almost blew her up with a grenade, but if Carol is harming her to the point of she's about to kill her, then at that point they will step in and stop that no matter what it takes. But I don't know if that sort of falls in line with a biological imperative, or that's just a sort of protective sense of trying to come to the aid of quote unquote one of their own.
Yeah, no, I don't think that they would forcibly intervene.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like the scene confirms that,
Which is why we get all the please
actually.
carols. Yeah.
That they're just, but they'll try to pressure or persuade her or whatever, you know, like that's okay. But to actually stop her from doing what she's doing by force
Yeah.
feels like it's off limits.
Yeah, I think so.
And then that's even to the level of when Zoja starts having a heart attack or whatever, they ask Carol if they can please help her.
Yeah,
will you allow
exactly.
us to?
Yeah.
So you get the impression that if for some reason she said no, they're like, oh,
Yeah. No,
bummer.
I think you're right. I think that
And
we are establishing very clear patterns of behaviors by which they must conform. The no lying, the no intervening, no violence, no harm. Ask permission if it seems as though this is something, a path that Carol is taking because what she wants to do, therefore it might make her happy. We have to ask if we can intervene and sort of send it on a different path before we can even try to save the life of one of our own, as you're saying.
yeah, like they're almost programmed to where they can't, um, again, with the exception of whatever goes on with the joining. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
Again, it feels like they're almost perfectly moral. They can't infringe on your autonomy at all,
correct,
right?
correct.
So if what Carol wants to do is kill Joja, the best they could say is, please don't.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, that sort of thing. So that's interesting. Another thing I just got to thinking about, which I thought about before, but I don't think I mentioned in previous weeks, is the food.
Okay.
And we were talking about Manusos's food, but more generally, if you're not him and you're not Carol,
Hmm.
it's like, hey, you want some food? You call up the others, they bring the food to you. It's great. And I think we previously discussed how they're probably doing that for one another as well in some way. Maybe we'll see that at some point. Or are they? Right?
Yeah.
So putting together everything we know, right? We've learned that they're vegetarians. They won't kill a lobster, even
Right.
to, if the lobster's already dead, though, they're happy to cook it and serve it. Of course, lobster's a wrinkle there because lobsters, it's such a fascinating history of lobsters. Are you aware that at one point it was considered just like garbage food?
Oh, really? No, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, because it was just like killed and canned,
Okay.
and everyone's view of it was that it was like worse than tuna fish, you know? And then some weirdo discovered that if you boil it alive, oh, it's
Right.
delicious. Anyway,
A little
that's
butter on
sorry.
it. Yep.
That's an aside. I could recommend David Foster Wallace's essay, "Consider the Lobster."
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um, anyway, I was just saying. Oh, okay. So they're not willing to kill.
Yes.
So at very least, it would seem like, and they don't eat meat themselves, I would presume, right?
Sure.
So at
Surely
some
not.
point, and it wouldn't take all that long. We're still, I think, a weekend.
Hmm.
At some point here, there's going to be no more meat.
Right. Yes. It's either stuck in some sort of frozen facility and gone bad, or they have gotten rid of it. Um,
I mean, I guess the frozen stuff would last for a long time, but there'd be no
yeah.
more maybe like fresh meat
Right.
or
Exactly.
whatever.
Exactly.
We know that Kuba won't be happy about that, although he asked, well, if I kill something, will you cook it for me? And maybe he'll feel like that's good enough. But what about everything else? You know what I mean? Um, to the extent that we are talking about this collective hive mind,
Hmm.
um, do they still have individual preferences to the level where they will preserve the great variety of foods we've become used to?
I
Are they
think that
farming?
seems contrary to their sense of efficiency and just sense of um, maximizing only what helps us in survival and helps us accomplish our goals. So I'm thinking it's just sort of a no, we're just going to do whatever nourishes you, whatever gives you the basics. We're not
Yeah,
going to have any preferences towards what you eat or drink.
it's hard for me to imagine that they are continuing the production of Doritos,
Right.
you know?
Exactly.
So I just started thinking about all of this, and we'll see what the series may or may not do with it. But that's a kind of narrative pathway out there. It does kind of seem to me if it were just down to the others, that yeah,
Hmm.
they would just be eating like soybean bars or
Yeah.
something. I don't know.
Whatever is the easiest and most efficient thing to make. Yeah.
What meets your nutritional requirements, and all of that, and why would we be concerned about anything else? You know what I
Right.
mean? So,
Right.
beans and rice for everyone, something like that. So we'll see how that goes, and if they do anything with that. But that is a big thing. We're still pretty early on, and so if
Right.
we presume that Carol's not going to manage to reverse this in the near future,
Yeah.
yeah, again, where does the show go? What can it play with? And that might be a big thing, for the like 12 people who aren't part of the hive mind. They might be rather upset if they can no longer get delicious food.
That's just what I was going to say. Yeah. At what point can they know? Yeah. Can Carol not just make a request for anything? And is that contrary to what they want, which is if Carol at any point, says, I want the eggs Benedict I got in the hotel 20 years ago, they need to be able to provide that to her. How are you going to make sure that you're doing that? Well, they need to have opportunities in place for providing it.
Well, no, because they've already denied Kumba the lobster because there were
No, that's
no,
right. Yeah.
right. So they've already kind of established that if they would have to kill an animal in order to make your dinner, sorry, we
Yeah.
can't do that. Right.
Right.
That the one overrides the other in that way. So yeah, thinking about the food, still thinking about what are they doing with the rest of their time, and,
Mhm.
and I hope we get some kind of entry into that a bit
Yeah.
more at some point here.
I thought it was an interesting line, and they didn't dive into this, but it opens up a whole series of doors when Carol's looking for the drugs, and she says, she wants some heroin, and he mentions something about how around the world they have millions of people that are, recovering substance abusers, and so they're basically trying to take care of those people as they, their minds are such that they are getting past this thing, but their bodies are still in the process of
Hmm.
recovering from lack of these substances, and so they've got to have a whole operation to take care of those people. So there's things like that going on that we're just not even aware of yet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think we do know that. Okay, well, the first goal was to clean up from
Hmm.
all of the mess that was created from the event of the joining.
Right.
Um, and I guess I don't even know if they're done with that yet. It's been like a
Eight,
week.
800 million people, that would take a long time.
Yeah, but at the same time, so it's 800 million people died or whatever, and whatever other destruction of property and infrastructure and all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it might still take more than a week to clean up all this mess, but we have to
Yeah,
bear in mind that you've got like the other 7 billion people
that's right.
all saying like, well, this is priority one. You know what
They're
I mean?
they're
So if
they're
you're
all
imagining
operating on it. Yeah.
all of humanity, focusing on this task, how long does it take? I don't know. Maybe more than a week still, because that's potentially quite a lot of wreckage, but
Yeah.
maybe not. Let's see. Looking at our notes, the one big thing that we haven't hit on yet is the backstory we get with Carol with regard to Freedom Falls. That apparently she was sent to like conversion. What's the right term for this? Conversion
Conversion therapy camp. Yeah.
therapy camp. I was supposed to say gay conversion therapy camp, but like,
Conversion therapy where yes, she looks as though she was forced by her parents once they learned about her lifestyle to go to this camp. And so providing some real depth and complexity of why Carol, I mean, beyond just the basic morality of it, why she's so passionate about this idea of being forced to have a certain lifestyle, being forced to assimilate into what they're doing.
yeah, and her knee-jerk resistance to the idea that we're going to do this to
Yes.
you for your own good, you're going to benefit from this, and that kind of rhetoric.
Yeah.
um, I know that these kind of conversion camps have been banned but then maybe unbanned, and I'm not sure where things stand at this point in Trump's America.
Yeah, I think state by state there are some ways they have gotten around some of those things. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But interesting backstory for her. Um, and I don't know if we needed it per se, but it does kind of deepen
Yeah.
something. I mean, we could return to that question again. It's kind of a running thing, so we don't want to. We don't necessarily need to talk about it every week, but I think it's a running question of to what extent we are on Carol's side or identifying with her as opposed to
Yeah.
thinking that she's like a terrible person. It's interesting that I do keep seeing people in the world who are watching the show and enjoying it, who at the same time think she's an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yep. And I mean,
Uh,
for all intents and purposes, she is. However, that doesn't disqualify you from wanting your own individuality. I mean, you could still be, you have the right to be that if that's what you want to be.
I guess, yeah. It's interesting to me because I feel like maybe I'm a little bit more sympathetic to her than some other people are, and it's a interesting thing to ponder about myself. On the other side of things, I was thinking about, well, given how the others and everything, they are kind of perfectly moral or close
Yeah.
to it, or and they're devoting themselves to the overall collective good, and
Yeah.
however I can briefly characterize that. I've also been asking myself, like, okay, well, how far would I have to dial this back to be on board with it completely? And in terms of my like personal politics and the like, I feel like it's two or three notches.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like they're at 11. Can we like dial it down to I don't know 8?
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Exactly.
Um, then potentially it'd be making sure everyone has a place to stay, enough to eat, access to
That's
medical
right.
care, all of this stuff.
That's
You know what
right.
I mean? So I don't know. It's interesting. Um, all right. Anything else you want to hit on with this one?
No, I thought this was good. Thought it was very sort of world opening for where we're going to go next. So looking forward to the next episode.
Same for sure. Again, indications are that Apple TV is going to release it on Wednesday. Um, we'll be back on next Friday to talk about episode 5. Hopefully, you'll join us. Thanks always for listening to the podcast. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. If so, please do leave a good rating, review, all that good stuff. If you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's greatly appreciated. Check out tvobsessive.com where you can find written work on all sorts of TV shows, past and present. And if you want to follow the site on social media, search for TV Obsessive. You should find us. And we'll be back with you on the podcast next week.
All right, looking forward to it and see you then.